Now, anyone who knows me and has worked with me in the physical therapy realm knows that generally I don't like physical therapists. I have never liked physical therapists simply because of the way you practice. Largely, my profession is unethical. They're unethical because in outpatient clinics they see multiple patients at a time, and that is the general rule. They're unethical because they continue to see patients that they can't fix, the continuous chronic pain patient. And when I think about it, it's actually very sad that after 25 years, this is the way I feel about my own profession. Because if I was an electrician, I probably would have congeniality towards my fellow electricians. But in physical therapy, I have anything but. So people ask me, well, what made you become a physical therapist to begin with? Well, actually, I went in for all the right reasons. I was 26 years old. I was on a long-range radio reconnaissance team, what they called the LRRPs a long time ago. Today they call them the SOD-A's. Basically, to stay on this team, you had to be able to carry a carry load of 100 pounds. The highest I carried was 103 pounds. During that training exercise that was in New Brunswick, Canada, the temperature was about 10 or 15 below zero with a wind chill that reached up to 50 below. We walked 5 kilometers, had to wear snowshoes because of the deep snow. That's the type of level of fitness you had to be on the team. So the team members were very athletic is my endpoint. And I got the idea to be a physical therapist in a training school in which we were doing some desert training. Myself and the new lieutenant had gotten paired up together to stand guard at some outpost in the desert. We largely had nothing to do and were trying to keep each other awake. He was disgusted with the Army, as I was at that time. We were talking about what we were going to do once we discharged. And he talked for 5 minutes about it was either a sister or a niece who was a physical therapist. That put the idea into my head, and I wondered to this day if I would have come up with this idea on my own. I just never would have thought of physical therapy as a profession. And I really thought I was going to find my home base. I thought physical therapists were going to be just like me, highly motivated, highly driven, and whose whole purpose in life was to do good for other people. And by my volunteer hours in 1995, I knew I wasn't going to get along with the profession. By the time I actually got into physical therapy school, I had a term for you. I called you the la-di-da people. La-di-da, look at me, I'm a physical therapist. Because the pretension was almost unbearable even in the student phase of physical therapy. I didn't go to my own graduation. And why? Because generally I didn't like most of you. I knew that most of my class weren't going to do the right thing. As a matter of fact, I once got into an argument with a fraternity boy in my class, and he knows who he is if he's watching this video, and he asked me why I didn't like fraternities. And I told him, because you're trained to be sheep. You're not going to develop the strength to do the right thing when the time comes. Because even as an intern, I already saw that the profession was completely corrupt, that most physical therapists were completely corrupt. And I told this guy, 20 years from now, you're going to be a sheep who just follows the herd. You aren't going to do the right thing. You're not going to stand up. You've never lived in the real world, besides working in a restaurant on weekends that your dad owned. And you're not going to have the strength to stand up for the profession. Simple as that. Well, here we are 2.5 decades later, and he is working for not only a corrupt company, but one of the most corrupt companies in the nation. One of these companies that sees 2 to 4 patients at a time. He probably gets quarterly bonuses. He's now a manager in this company. He's well set in the suburbs and has spent his entire career not doing the right thing, just like I told him he wouldn't in 1997. And not just to pick on this guy if he's watching this video, because that's just one example which exemplifies the whole of physical therapy. That is most of us in our profession. And that's why I don't like most of you. There were a couple in my class that I probably could have gotten along with and probably should have hung out with more than I did. There was one guy, he was definitely the smartest guy in our class, and his dad was a cop. He was the smartest guy in our class, and he studied really hard, nonstop. He made a good therapist, I heard, and I think he eventually became a hospital administrator type. Another guy had flunked out of college the first time from partying too much, learned his lesson, recreated himself after working construction for a couple of years. He got into physical therapy school. Today he still does the right thing from what I know, and I believe he's a hospital administrator as well. There were a couple people that were in their mid-30s who had had careers before, who were down-to-earth people. One of them became the leading pediatric therapist in the school system in Indianapolis. There were good people in my class, but most of you weren't. And it really wasn't that you weren't good people, it's just you were people with no fortitude whatsoever. And it took me years to figure out why physical therapists are like this, because this profession is made up of 75% women, and I've never been on one date with one physical therapist when I was a student or a professional in the field. And I rarely have any friends with the 25% of male therapists because most of them are beta males. But please note, before you start calling me this misogynistic type, I get along with nurses fabulously. And that got me thinking, how come you get along with nurses fabulously when most of the profession in nursing is made up of women and most of the profession in physical therapy is made up of women, but you don't get along with most of them at all? And rarely the few males that are in this profession. Well, it's because of your background. I finally figured it out. Most nurses come from working class backgrounds. They're much more ground level, much more real life level. They see things for what they are because life has hit their family in the face more than once. Most physical therapists, however, they came from privileged backgrounds. And I know what a privileged background is because this will surprise most of my former classmates. I actually came from that background as well. A long time ago, before I entered the military, before I was a mover of furniture for 2 years, before I was a dishwasher. My family came from the suburbs too. I grew up in rural Indiana in a working class neighborhood, yes, but my father with a chemical engineer background made the most money in the neighborhood. And then he got a job in high-level management right under the vice president of operations for a company in Cincinnati. We lived in a 90-foot rancher in the suburbs with a private pool. And then years later, my family got divorced and suddenly I was thrust into poverty. And I tell you what, it's much harder to be thrust into poverty than it is to be brought up with it. So I know who you are from the suburbs. I grew up with you too. And I didn't learn strength in the suburbs. I learned strength from moving furniture for 2 years. I learned strength from joining the military and joining the SOD A team. I learned strength from carrying just over 100 pounds in New Brunswick, Canada, with a wind chill that was 50 below. I was in situations where life hit you in the face. I always say now that the military kind of made me a mean SOB, and I think the reason for that was healthcare needed a mean SOB. Most of you were never tested, so therefore most of you never stand up today. The physical therapy personality is largely comprised of a personality of privilege. You live in the la-di-da world, and that's why you don't stand up today. Because you're too afraid, because basically most of you have never had hard times in your life, and you're scared of hard times coming, if you were to put that job in jeopardy which keeps you in the high suburbs. So that very much explains why I never really got along in this profession to begin with. Because if I was a tradesman, I'd be surrounded by guys who would stand up. In physical therapy, most of you won't. And my generation of the class of 1999 has completely blown it for this field. Really, I think most of you are lost and I'm probably not even talking to you, although it's not too late to change if you've been practicing unethically your whole career. You can still salvage yourself. But largely, I'm talking to the younger therapists, especially those who are just getting out of school. Due to the coercion of a friend of mine who's now a professor in physical therapy school, I did write up a 50-some page travel PT handbook on how to practice ethically and make a lot of money, which I did over the years. Because I'm largely early retired today, and I kept my ethics every step of the way in the quarter of a century that I practiced. So I'm largely talking to the young. Maybe you don't come from an environment where you had to test yourself, but that doesn't mean you can't develop strength today. Just because you came from privileged background like most physical therapists did, doesn't mean you have to spend your life being weak. Most of you have it in you somewhere, it's just never been brought out yet. You didn't have to jump out of planes when you're younger or carry 100 pounds through a temperature that reached 50 below zero. But it doesn't mean you can't become strong, and we need you to be strong if we're going to salvage this profession. Because the fact is, we are in shambles today. I see it on the forums and YouTube all the time of young therapists leaving the field after a few years because it's that bad out there. I'm on my last waning years. I take a few contracts here and there, largely to keep my licensure, or if I just feel like coming back to the field for a bit. And I only practice in remote Alaska. Most of you still have a long road ahead of you, and you're 150 grand in debt. So you're going to be in the physical therapy profession probably for a while. And I'm imploring you to start doing the right thing and undo what my generation did to this profession. There is a personality of pretentiousness with privilege, which largely makes up most therapists, but it doesn't mean you have to be that way. I'm asking you not to be afraid of life and the sometimes hard times that come with it. I'm asking you to possibly lose your job to do the right thing, yes. And what you'll find is that if you do the right thing, the universe tends to take care of you. Nobody likes me in the field, but yet here I am early retired and I can still get contracts anytime I feel like it. The fact is, every time I lost a contract or a job, one door closed but one window opened. This personality of pretension needs to be transformed into one of service towards his fellow man. And you can only serve your fellow man in healthcare well if you're doing the right thing. Therapists, change the way you're doing things.